we used to ask for everybody to keep their webcams on just to make sure that the bandwidth is secured, and just to make sure that the whatever people's Wi-Fi issues are good. If your webcam's turned on when you're asking questions and stuff like that, that's more than welcome to do that. Everybody's entered the meeting muted. Just remain on mute unless you're unmuting to ask a question when we have that opportunity. The format of the meeting is going to be reviews and updates from overview and updates from Swim Alberta, and then there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions. We've got it in here that questions can be sent by text, but we can use the meeting chat for the text. For the questions, we'll go through the questions as received as much as possible. If there's additional questions that we aren't able to get to, you can always email any of us after the meeting, and we'll compile the answers and do a Q&A afterwards, similar to how we've done some of those in the past. So just at this point, I'm going to just turn it over to Lynette. I think that was the right order.
Sorry, I was on mute. I forget about that. Thank you, Kevin and Cheryl, for putting this together. We realize that there has been lots of questions as stage two is approached, and more questions have come of what stage 3 will look like. So we're hoping that with this town hall, it will give everybody information that they can move forward with and begin planning accordingly. There will be some decisions that we will be making afterwards, and we will have follow-up information for you. So with that, I will hand it off to Cheryl to start us off.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lynette. And first, I just want to welcome all of you to not only to the session tonight, but to the summer swim season, because it looked there for a few weeks that although from our last town hall, we talked about be prepared for the stops and starts, and soon after that, we went into a stop position, I believe it was. And so I know it was on everybody's mind if we would see a summer season, and it looks like we will. So I am excited to have people back in the water. It's wonderful. I was telling Lynette and Kevin earlier today, as you're driving down the streets or going for walks in the evening, the school fields are filled again with baseball players and soccer players, and it's nice to see that youth sport is back. So I'm looking forward to summer season with all of you. I wanted to talk briefly, just a couple highlight items, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. As Annette alluded to, we are in stage 2 of the Open for Summer plan. We will be sending out some additional stage 2 documents tomorrow, which Kevin's going to share sort of highlights and a preview of tonight with all of you, but they will officially go out to the entire swimming community tomorrow. You will have noticed that there was a bit of a lag time from when stage 2 opened until we are able to get out that document. And really it's because we are waiting for confirmation and the guidance document to be produced by Alberta Health. So although we get a good sense of what's happening, we always want to make sure that we have the correct information. So you will see that lag time again. That will likely happen with stage 3. What will be potentially different about stage 3 is that at this point, what we have been told from Alberta Health is that when we enter into stage 3, we will be entering into it with likely no legislation. So what that means is the current health orders that we have all been bound to likely will not be there, and we'll move into a system where Alberta Health is going to be providing still recommendation guidance for all of the various sectors across the province. From the get-go, Alberta, or Swim Alberta, has made a commitment to not only follow the health orders, but follow the recommended guidance of Alberta Health. And we'll continue to do that in stage free as well too. So although it speaks of a full lifting of restrictions, I think you should anticipate and plan for that you might see very similar return to play and return to competition that you're experiencing in that stage 2 that we're going to share with you tonight. So again, as more information comes, we'll update that and communicate that out. But just to prepare yourself that there will still be some recommendations, because the priority of Swim Alberta and obviously of Alberta Summer Swimming has always been to ensure the safety of our athletes and participants. We know that the 11 and under without the vaccinations currently available to them, that there will be recommendations for them. Again, I'm anticipating that it's going to be very similar to what we're seeing in stage 2, where there's that cohorting, no mixing of cohorts, a delay in moving from cohort to cohort. And I do anticipate that although it might not be written into health orders, that we're going to still see it in recommendation or guidance that comes from Alberta Health. So again, just be aware of that. And again, you'll anticipate that there could be a slight delay before we get final and confirmed information out to everybody. We do our best to kind of do sort of a prelim or what we know, so you can get started as you would have seen in stage 2, and then a final confirmation when that information is available to us. I want to speak a little bit about competitions, and I know that was a lot of the questions that came in through the registration, and Kevin's going to dive into the competitions a little bit more deeply when he walks through the requirements with you. But what I would say is, yes, there will be competitions this summer. Will it look like the competitions you had 2 summers ago? No, they likely will not, right? And so you are going to see reduced numbers of individuals on the pool deck, both due to capacity of occupancy within pools and any distancing that may still need to be maintained or recommended. So although competitions will occur, they're likely not to occur with the same numbers of kids that we had in previous seasons. And I think there's ways that we can adapt, and kids can still have a great season. They can still race, we can still sanction events, but the meets and the plan that you're likely used to from previous years, where it was all laid out and, you know, you had meets in different communities on different weekends, might need to be flexible this year so that we can create those racing opportunities in a safe way. It may mean that you actually have more competitions going on in a region, so that you can kind of split the numbers just depending on registration. So again, know that competitions will be a part of what summer swimming looks like throughout July and August. And Kevin will have more information on that, but know they are going to look a little different, and they're going to look a little different with officials on the pool deck too, and the numbers as well there. So I just want to preface that just to sort of set the stage for when Kevin goes a little deeper into some of the requirements. I also wanted to briefly talk just about who is on the pool deck, and this is coming from both a risk management sort of protocols for COVID, as well as a safe sport perspective. And a lot of this stuff we weren't able to implement with summer swimming last season because there wasn't really a full season that you had. We just had a handful of clubs. So what we're looking for this year is really limited number of people on the pool deck, both in a training setting and a competition setting. So your registered coaches obviously will be there. Your registered athletes, when it's their training or their competition, will obviously be there. But we're not looking to have additional individuals, whether it's parents. The COVID coordinator does not need to be on the pool deck. That can be very much a remote role that is done through that training piece. Again, it's just to try to minimize the number of people, helps manage the contact tracing that you have to do, and just allows the maximum number of swimmers and coaches to be in the places they need to be throughout the season. And the same is true for competitions. And Kevin is going to dive again a little deeper into what the competitions are going to look like from an officiating perspective, but plan for fewer officials on the pool deck. And we have some guidance around minimal officials that you can use in planning meets. I'm not anticipating that we're going to see 3 timers per lane. a stroke judge at the turn end of each lane and the start end of each lane, or 2 stroke and turn judges walking up and down the side of the pool. I think we can run meets with fewer numbers of officials, still keep the integrity of the meet, and again, just allow for that extra space that may be needed for athletes. And with that, we would be looking at people who are not in assigned roles should also not be on the pool deck. And this is really coming from a safe sport perspective as well too. So senior officials, whatever role they're in, don't have the authority to come onto the pool deck unless they're in an assigned role for that competition. We have sort of removed through this period, both from a year-round perspective and then with summer as well, that advisory referee, again, just to minimize the number of officials that we have on the pool deck, both from a COVID perspective, and then always never to allow sort of drop-ins from a safe sport perspective. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those things just to sort of set sort of expectations for the summer as we go forward. Like I said at the top, I am excited to have a summer season ahead of us. I think it's going to be wonderful to get as many athletes back in the water as we can, and young coaches and experienced coaches back on the pool deck coaching. And I'm looking forward to a real successful summer season for all of you, even though it may look a little bit different as we go through it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to share with you some of the information to help you plan for your summer season.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I'm gonna just sort of dive right in here. Last week, there was a published document that had a bit of a disclaimer to it that said, the following requirements will be, are being listed as they're understood until there's something confirmed from Alberta Health. So we did, as Cheryl mentioned, we did receive something this week. It's anticipated that you're going to see the full document that I'm going to share with you tonight, tomorrow. So just in terms of the return to swimming requirements, these would have been published last week. Just bear with me here. My footer is in the way of my text, all the pictures. So there we go. Just in terms of some of the general return to swimming requirements, all individuals must maintain 2 meters of distance when possible. So that includes when the athletes and coaches enter the building, when everybody is in the change room, when people are exiting the building. Once pool training begins, now this is one of the pieces where there's no longer a restriction. Once pool training begins, because it's a part of the sport, the swimmers are not required to maintain distancing. And so that may mean, there's not a specific number per lane, that may mean that there's, multiple kids per lane passing, whatever the training scenario is. At this point, that is something that is permitted. Now, in terms of the overall group size, the way it's worded that we understand is that's 1/3 of fire code occupancy. And then I also said as permitted by the facility. So the facility may have a specific number for the group size that are permitted. Now, the group size is also permitted for participants of any age with an asterisk, and I'll get to the asterisk on the next page. And so that participants of any age may include, individuals that are 18 or 19. And prior to that, that was not, prior to May, I think that was not permitted in terms of adult participation. Masks are required indoors for all participants until the actual physical activity begins. So meaning swimmers would wear their mask through the change room, onto the pool deck. Before they get in the water, they take off their mask. Following practice, they would dry off, put their mask on, proceed through the change room on the way out. Coaches will be wearing masks all the way in through practice, and this is for indoor activity. There are some additional requirements and recommendations that are in the document when it comes to outdoors. The masking is not required, for outdoors. That being said, individuals must maintain distancing, and it is recommended that coaches wear masks while they're instructing or teaching or coaching outdoors. Spectators may or may not be permitted by the facility. So this is, you know, one of those individual pieces that, you know, the facility may not have the spectator area open for the swim clubs. So that's, you know, that's something for each club to work with their facility on to understand what their, you know, what their specific rules and requirements are for participation. So I mentioned the asterisks about the, you know, the group size. One of the pieces in the guidance document is that, you know, based on vaccination, participants age 11 and under are strongly recommended to participate in cohorts of a maximum of 50. Coaches are not included in this number. And it's, you know, for the cohort, it's one cohort at a time, not mixing cohorts, and if there is a change of a cohort, there should be 1 week between cohorts. And that is, you know, that maximum 50, very similar to what the cohorts existed as last year. And this is specific for participants age 11 and under. In terms of some of the general coaching requirements, the coaches are to be masked at all times, and that is indoors. They may coach multiple groups. So for example, a coach can be on deck from 4 to 5, you know, with the 11 and unders, and then from 5:15 to 6:15 with the 12 and overs. A coach may come within the 2 meters of distancing for brief interactions. And so, you know, if I'm approaching, you know, swimmer A, and I'm just, you know, showing them how to raise their elbow a little farther, right? And then I back away. So it's a brief interaction to correct form or technique. Coaches may temporarily remove their mask to demonstrate a skill. And so, for example, a coach might take off their mask and demonstrate a dive or a flip turn, and then they're, you know, drying off, putting their mask back on, and the swimmers would be participating. If there's, you know, coaches are outdoors, the coach is putting the mask on before they come within 2 meters. So they do need to have that mask with them, even though they are coaching outdoors. And the recommendation, as I mentioned, you know, 2 slides ago, is that it is recommended that coaches mask outdoors at all times when they're providing instruction. You know, if there was ever a reason where they had to rush up to somebody, they're not having to find it. It's just, you know, they just have their mask on. Just in terms of a couple other return to swimming requirements, there's a role, there's a roles and responsibilities in the document for something called the COVID-19 response coordinator. And this is a required role for all clubs. The response coordinator is the individual within the club that makes sure that they're aware of any requirements, any changes, you know, from health. If there's a positive case within a club, you know, if that gets reported to the club by contact tracers or by the family, the response coordinator would communicate that to Swim Alberta. There's when it comes to that type of communication, there's no names required. It's just the fact that there's a case, and then outlining whatever next steps occur, so that we're aware of what the clubs are being told. And you know, sometimes there's questions about, you know, what needs to happen, and so there is a detailed role description for that COVID-19 response coordinator. The last piece, really quickly, in terms of the return to swimming requirements, in terms of stage 3, we don't, outside of what's been on that main page saying that there's limited restrictions, you know, or no restrictions, we don't have specific details, as Cheryl mentioned. So this is the piece that's going to take up a little bit more time other than our training requirements. So, you know, at this point, competitions are permitted. That's something that has been communicated by the government of Alberta and Alberta Health. And so at this point, before I go on to anywhere, I'm going to go show you guys a sneak peek of the specific requirements. And so I'm just going to try to share a second screen And this is the part where it's a new platform. I'm not sure how to get back from the second screen to this first one. So just, it might get a little ugly here in a few minutes, but just bear with me here. So this is, you're going to see this is dated June 17th. So it's very likely this is going to be published tomorrow. Currently it's draft, not for distribution, just in the event that there's any potential changes. So this is going to look very similar to the document that was shared last week. And there is a document on our COVID-19 page where I'll show you in a little bit that you can read if you want to see what the current return to swimming requirements are. So I'm going to skip past a lot of these. Our table of contents has got a little bit bigger because starting right after the general requirements for risk mitigation of COVID-19 on page 5, we've added our competition health and safety requirements on page 9, as well as 5 more appendixes to this document. So I am going to fast forward to page 9. So just bear with me. Hope nobody gets seasick from this. Okay, so these are our competition health and safety requirements. Now, when these have been developed, there's been a lot of detail and I'll say versions and different pieces that have been added to this. And competitions are a lot more complicated than practice, in that we have multiple people coming together from multiple clubs. We've got many different member types coming in at once. If everybody sort of remembers competitions of the past where there's sometimes a lot of bodies on the pool deck. And so just as we go through these requirements, there's a few key pieces that that I'm going to stress a little bit more. So anyways, first thing is in terms of a facility agreement, there must be a facility agreement in place between the club and the facility. And this happens if it doesn't matter if it's a Wednesday evening practice where you're taking times for 3 swimmers. If there's going to be extra bodies on the pool deck in terms of officials, make sure that there's a facility agreement so that the facility is aware of the bodies that are coming in, and as well as the other requirements that are within this document. There's an additional role, and now this is not to be confused, and I apologize about the similar job titles, but the additional role is the competition safety coordinator. So the competition safety coordinator also has roles and responsibilities that's clearly outlined. It's very similar in terms of some of the COVID awareness and reporting pieces, but it's different in that the role is specifically to work with the meet manager and the referee and make sure that all the other pieces that are required are in place in terms of the competition safety plan, and making sure that the correct officials are on deck, spaced out as required, distanced as required, I should say. And so this role does require an orientation. That orientation is something that I'll get to in a little bit, but that orientation will probably be in the ballpark of, it'll be another 1 hour, hopefully 1 hour webinar that I'll communicate and send out an invitation for clubs that are wanting to have somebody fulfill that role. In terms of types of competitions, there is a list of types. Some of these types are a little bit specific to the year-round clubs. There is the option of a virtual competition. These competition types all have some specific requirements. Some of these requirements are in one of the appendixes. I'm not going to spend a lot of details on those. Those are something easily read. There is a summer class, like a summer meet type and sanction type. specifically for summer swimming that all the summer club swimmers would be using. If there was some form of record attempt, that would, I think you would just need to be contacting myself to see if that's correct. And I'm not 100% sure if the registration applies to that, but that's a conversation that we'll figure out at a later date. So in terms of maximum numbers, this is one of the pieces that's been outlined in the guidance has been 1/3 occupancy, but the way we're wording it within our competition requirements is the facility will determine the occupancy numbers in accordance with the occupancy standards for both the pool and the spectator areas. So it might be 1/3 for the spectator area because they're seated. The pool might be different than that 1/3 number based on individuals having to maintain their 2 meters of distance whenever possible. And so, if that means that there's, somebody every 2 meters seated on bleachers up the side of the pool for marshalling, if that means that there's, if that means that swimmers can't be, having a big team area with their towels like over in the corner, that is going to have to be thought out in terms of like how the number of people can be in the facility with their 2 meters of distancing. So the maximum numbers is something that if we just go back to that facility agreement, that those maximum numbers need to be part of that facility agreement. The next piece is the competition safety plan. This competition safety plan is, we're going to have a Word document that's a template for you to fill out. It's going to include all the different pieces, and it's something that will be attached to your meet information package. And so the meet information package that says the time, the date, the rules, what events you're going to do, what facility you're at, you're also going to be attaching this competition safety plan that's completed as a part of your process to do a competition. This competition safety plan is very likely to be completed by your competition safety coordinator, who may be your referee, who may be your meet manager. That's the most likely role, but it could be your COVID coordinator as well for that. Anyways, there is a competition safety plan available. I'll show you that in a minute. And there's also a facility diagram, and the facility diagram is intended to show traffic flow and the traffic, as well as location of different bodies. And so, there's a location for the referee, there's a location for team seating. If there's 2 or 3 teams, or if there's teams that have kids under the age of 12 that are in cohorts, you're going to be showing where those different locations are. And on the deck, just because they're in a cohort doesn't mean that everybody is a free for all. It's still, they're maintaining distancing, and that all needs to be outlined in this plan. The plan might include warm-up assignments or lane assignments, similar to how those have run at other events, just to make sure that distancing is maintained when there is the case of cohorts. The next big piece is competition administration. Now, this competition administration is a lot of the individual pieces of, what may have happened at meets in the past, and, what are things that need to be considered. And so I can give you a couple examples. I don't know if I want to read all of these to you specifically at this point, but some of these examples are, session timeouts. And so the high-tech meet manager program, for example, would normally put things at a 30-second interval between races, meaning, from heat 1 to heat 2, it's usually around 30 seconds, just give or take, because sometimes there's delays, sometimes they go faster. There might be extra time needed because you need to get kids up behind the blocks, they need to finish their race, and then they need to move away before the next heat comes up. So, it might be a 1-minute interval that needs to be expected, or longer, just depending on the age of the kids and what the traffic flow scenario is going to be for your pool. There's a number of pieces like this within the competition administration section, but that is something that each competition COVID coordinator, you should be reading, putting into the safety plan, making sure that the officials are aware within their briefings, making sure the coaches are aware, making sure that information is in the meet information package. Masks. We do have a section on masks. Now, there is a mask section under the return to swimming requirements. For the purposes of competition, this is also in here, just because we've outlined a little bit of a process, what would be expected for swimmers at a competition. So, making sure that they've got a dry, it could be, you could have some Ziploc bags behind the blocks for some swimmers to put their mask into if they didn't bring their own, so that when they finish swimming, they can grab their mask and it can be dry for them. So anyways, the piece about masks, when it comes to stage 3, we don't know if there's going to be regional differences within the province. It's possible that some municipalities maintain a mask mandate while other municipalities lift that requirement. And so where required, masks are required. So, and that goes for all individuals within the competition or attending the competition. So cleaning, disinfection procedures or cleaning, this is something that is generally done by the facility, making sure that you are using products that would be approved by the facility. If there's anything that's shared equipment, a process to make sure that it's cleaned between users is the key piece, and that might include watches, plungers, computers, clipboards, pens. The entry and exit of pool being cleaned or disinfected prior to each session or before and after each session. And this is based on the facility requirements. The facility's primary concern about doing the cleaning around the pool is that the products that they use are safe to be used in the pool. So that is something to make sure that you work with your facility on. Hospitality, at this time, it is strongly recommended that hospitality and hospitality rooms are not provided. Competition session lengths should be considered to eliminate the need. As you develop your competition, making sure that you consider how long everybody is a reasonable time frame for them to be at the pool without that. That may include everybody bringing their own pre-filled water bottles, to make sure that that is available for them. But hospitality is not recommended at this time. In terms of heat sheets, making sure heat sheets are posted online is the recommendation. It's discouraged to sell the heat sheet, and dealing with that's more shared paper, shared money, or whatever the case is. The results, similar to the heat sheets, should be posted online. When possible, that might mean a little bit of a delay compared to how most people are used to operating in terms of like when the results can be posted. I know some facilities don't have great internet access, where those things can be posted. But avoiding posting the paper copy, behind the swimmer area and having all the swimmers, crowd around it and resulting in that type of scenario. And so that's one of the reasons for having the results posted online. In terms of figuring a process out for that, it would be important. In terms of records, an electronic timing system is required to be considered for a record. A time from a single backup watch or plunger is not eligible. There can be an error with the plunger or from that single watch. And the use of 3 timekeepers is not permitted at this time. Avoiding the extra crowding, because it's when distancing is possible, distancing needs to happen. So in terms of session lengths, it's recommended that sessions not exceed 4 hours. This is back to the hospitality piece. In terms of spectators, if the facility use is appropriate for spectators, all the requirements must be adhered to. The spectators may not be appropriate for the facility. So an example of why this would not be appropriate would be if, based on the distancing, you require that spectator area for the swimmers to be seated, or for the swimmers to be putting their information. That seating may not be available for the moms and dads and grandparents to watch the race. So that's something to work with your facility on, just to make sure that you're using the spectator seating as a part of your overall plan for the numbers. If there are spectators, the host club will be responsible to manage numbers, physical distancing, as well as the contact tracing and health screening, right? And so there's, if you do have spectators, there may be additional requirements for you as a club. Coaches must be fully registered and have swimmers participating in the competition to attend. So very along the same lines that Cheryl was mentioning, not having individuals on deck when they're not directly a part of what's occurring. So coaches must ensure they maintain distancing from other swimmers, coaches, officials, and volunteers. To ensure, to ensure there's the correct number of individuals on deck. There may be a separate spectator area or a separate area that coaches are required to be in, and that just sort of depends on the traffic flow and the spacing available at your facility. In terms of officials' roles and information, there's some key pieces for a couple of the major roles. So in terms of all officials, the key point already mentioned about shared equipment and paper, limiting when possible. If there is shared equipment, a plan for hand hygiene between users is important. There's a few key points for the meet manager, following all of the Swim Alberta requirements, working with the facility to make sure to develop the competition safety plan, as well as the safety coordinator and the meet referee. The meet manager working with the referee to confirm the officials roster. This may include your officials chair as well, but I'll go over that officials roster here in a second. One of the key pieces about that officials roster is the potential combining of roles. And like I said, I'll go over that in a second. The referee, all active referees must attend an orientation session. And so the referees are also in that same orientation session as the COVID competition safety coordinator. It will be in the fall. We had done it as separate sessions. For this go round, it'll be a combined session with the referees and the competition safety coordinators. The referee is in charge of the deck, and they do need to be aware of all of the requirements that are expected of everyone, and the details of the competition safety plan. Final thing for the referee: if masks are required, no mouth blown whistles. And so there are a number of electronic whistles that are all over the place. There's I think the most popular one is a Fox one. There are some other options, and if you do have a question about that, you're more than welcome to reach out. And timers. And so timers are not required when electronic timing, although it is, having one timer per lane to do the plunge does provide you a backup. When doing manual timing, one timer per lane, all timers should be expected to stand the same side of the lane or same side of the starting block. For example, everybody goes to the right. You may use some marking to remind everybody goes to the same side, and that's to make sure everybody is maintaining their 2 meters of distance. And going from 2 or 3 timers per lane plus electronics, if there is a missed swim or a missed time, the requirement will be to do a reswim, and so that would be a little bit of a change. But in terms of having the spacing and the numbers on the deck, that's the priority at this point. I am going to skip past some of these appendixes, and I'm going to go to our competition types. Now, Within the competition types and deadlines, there's going to be one thing in here for summer. It's listed as 3 weeks. The intent of that 3-week deadline is to make sure there's enough time to review the competition safety plan and the meet information package, and to make sure there's time for the club to receive their entries through the registration system. In addition to, it's making sure there's time for a feedback process to occur before the competition begins. If you're running your meet on, I'm going to make up a date. If you're running your meet on August 2nd and you're just waiting on facility time, if they don't know if it's going to be at 1 or 2, so you can't submit your meet information package yet, just send me an email, right? Or phone me, as long as I'm aware. Maybe you send me your draft meet information package ahead of time to review, so that it becomes an easier process other than waiting until after the deadline, right? And so just it's listed as a 3-week deadline right now. Understanding this is going to be an unusual year, try to be as flexible as possible, but the more communication that occurs to me, the more I can do my best to help the clubs run competitions, which is what all the excitement's about. So just in terms of the next piece, this is the competition safety plan. The competition safety plan outlines each piece of the requirements almost in order. And so this is going to be available as a Word document for you to fill out. And like I said, attach. And so the main roles, the name of the competition safety coordinator and their contact info, the age of the participants. If there's participants under the age of 12, there must be a plan to keep some of those under 12 cohorts from multiple clubs separate, should that need, if there's multiple clubs with kids under the age of 11, keeping those separate cohorts separated, there just needs to be a plan for that. So the maximum competition numbers includes the maximum facility occupancy. So you get this information from your facility. The total participants, swimmers, coaches, officials, volunteers, facility staff, that all contributes. And so the competitions cannot exceed any facility requirements, which may be limited to a portion or percentage of the fire code capacity, but that's a maybe. It may also just be based on distancing or whatever the facility specific requirements are. So warm-up requirements, if there's a specific warm-up schedule or lane assignments or empty lanes to make sure that the cohorts are separated, then you outline that for the clubs. If there's specific entrances and exits or change rooms or shower information, the traffic flow is going to be on the facility diagram, but if there's any other information, then you would include it here. A response for sick individuals, and so this is something that has been required since we sort of first started getting back to swimming. If somebody does develop symptoms, what's the plan? Many facilities have their own plan, and so that would be another piece to work with the facility on. Disinfection procedures, so if there's anything specific that the club needs to do outside of the facility, you would outline that. In terms of what the mask requirements are, what the timing is, what is the shared equipment, and what's the process to limit it, what's the plan for hand hygiene if there is shared equipment, locations of officials and coaches, any spectator requirements, any facility specific requirements. And so, a facility specific requirement might, be something about parking, for example, I don't know. And then if there's any additional pieces of information. Now, I do have this facility diagram that's a blank, but there is a sample that shows a number of different locations of the people around the pool deck, as well as the traffic flow. And anyways, you're welcome to, develop your own type of thing. And this template is also going to be available as a Word document that you can, put your own text boxes in and show, or you can hand draw it if you want. The last two pieces are we do have a competition checklist. This competition checklist is just intended to be a help for the clubs. It's all the requirements in order, but you still need to fill out that competition safety plan to make sure all those details are met. You can't use this, you can't use the checklist as the fine print, because the fine print is in the big details earlier. And then there's the role of the COVID-19 competition safety coordinator. Now, I'm just going to, this is where things might get a little messy. Okay, success so far, I think. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, lots of the COVID-19 information is under our COVID-19 info. We have a tab called Return to Swimming and Competition. This tab is where we keep our latest version of the requirements. And so that will be up at the top of the page. There's the appendix resources. There's the current ones. This is where those other appendixes that I mentioned, such as the competition safety plan, the facility diagram, competition types, the checklist, that's where all of this will be housed. So there is an additional, oh, this might not work. All right, I'll give it a try. There is another competition resource under here called Minimum Officials Roster. I'm going to wait to do this because it might mess up my system. We also have this Minimum Officials Roster under our Meet Manager information tab. So across the top of our page, we've got the officials section. And so the officials section has resources, clinics, the approved competition pools. But what we're looking for is the Meet Manager information. And so this was something that I'll spend a little bit more time on with the meet managers. We do have some of our rules and policies, our requirements for meet packages. There is a specific summer requirements for meet packages. There's instructions for new meet managers. There's steps for competition approval and sanctioning, which is intended to apply for what we'll call a normal season. And so at this point, we will, we'll skip over that. But what I want to show you is the minimum officials roster, just to try to give you a picture of how an officials roster may look quite different. So I'm going to have to open the document and probably share another screen. Okay.
We can see it, Kevin. Perfect.
Success. That wasn't too messy, I hope. So this is our minimum officials roster. And going back to last summer and early fall, our officials committee did a lot of work talking about reimagining swimming, and that reimagining swimming, had, there was lots of pieces to it, but in terms of, at the time, there was cohorts to 50 permitted, and, to have how many, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, to have 30 or 35 officials on the pool deck in a 6-lane, 25-meter pool, well, there'd be 15 kids swimming maximum. So it's not something that, if with a gathering size of 50, was going to work. But one of the real benefits of this reimagining swimming was the discussion and the willingness to think about how competitions could be delivered with a streamlined officials roster. And so this minimum officials roster, the intent is to have a name. I mean, you can modify this how you need to if there's multiple clubs involved, but there's a primary role as well as additional roles. And so some of the roles may be on deck roles, some of the roles may be off deck, right? And there's optional roles. And so I'm just going to sort of skip ahead to one of the examples, because I think this gives an example of what this might look like. And looks like the referee does have a lot of roles. some of these are not specific to, some of these may not specifically be done by the referee, but they may be shared around. So within this model, you know, all of the timers also have their turn certification, which, you know, it doesn't need to be that way, but it's just an option. And so there's a turn judge, there's timers, there's a stroke judge, you know, and the referee may be acting as a stroke judge as well. So this is one example. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. The facility diagram example also has a roster example. And so some of the examples that are provided, this is a 6-lane pool with manual timing and 9 officials total, right? And so that's vastly different from the 35 potentially that may have existed in the past. You know, the second example is a 6-lane pool with 11 officials on the deck. You know, as I mentioned, the timers don't all need to be turn judges. They could be, it could be an alternate turn judge. Like, so lane 1 is turn judge, lane 2 is not, right? But they're all timers at the one end. So those are just some of the examples. The third one is electronic timing, potentially with 6 officials on deck and then a couple other additional roles off deck. Some of the pieces that, you know, may occur depending on the facility space. It may mean that there's, you know, that the results aren't produced right away, just to make sure that all the kids have a chance to swim and the results are sort of calculated and figured out later. Now, there are a couple other pieces that come to this, and it might mean that there's a different disqualification process and that. So I'm going to figure out how to go back. Okay, I've shared the online resources. I've talked about the minimum officials roster. One final piece is all officials must be active in the Swimming Canada registration system. That club officials administrator information is going to be sent to clubs next week. And Megan will be, you know, working with the clubs to have those individuals set up as the club officials administrator. So just in terms of a couple review things, there's the safety plan template as a requirement, facility diagram template as a requirement, as well as the safety coordinator. And that, as I mentioned, is a different role. We are going to be doing, or I am going to be doing meet manager training this Sunday at 7 p.m. And now this is not specific to the return to swimming requirements or the return to competition. This is specific for the summer clubs as an opportunity for their meet managers to become familiar with, you know, how to list a meet, how to sanction a meet, where the results go, where where coaches upload entry files, you know, how that whole process works, as well as where the information and resources are for meet managers, you know, on that meet manager information page that I showed. The second training option or opportunity that's going to be provided is that orientation session. As mentioned, the plan is to offer that Saturday, June 26th at 9 in the morning. And so that is going to be for both the competition safety coordinator and the referee. I will send out an email invite to all the clubs either tomorrow or Friday with that information with a sign up piece. If your club is a COVID coordinator that really wants to do that role, that's great. If it's your meet manager, it may make things easier, but that is up to your club in terms of how you want to manage that. Just in terms of end of season options, which is I know that there's a lot of unknown, and so one of the pieces that is that's going to be available and offered. There will be a virtual competition very similar to what was offered last year. That virtual competition will have individual age group and club rankings. One of the things that I don't know, or probably none of us know, we don't know if all the clubs are going to be able to manage to get to a meet, or what individual, you know, families or swimmers, you know, scenarios are, you know, to be able to access those type of events. And so just to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in a ranking, this individual age group and club ranking will be offered. The process will be a little bit different than last year to make sure that, you know, the clubs and the coaches are getting used to using high tech for entries. And so, like I said, I will be sending communication about that in the next little while. The second option is the outdoor regional festival. So depending on numbers and pool options, these may occur in multiple locations. One of the things about outdoor is that outdoor is not limited by facility space, so that distancing can occur for a much wider area. And so anyways, there is the option to take all the combined results of the festivals and produce a year-end ranking if there is an appetite for that outside of the virtual competition. So, and anyways, I'm gonna pause there and turn it over to Lynette.
Hi. All right. So as you can see, Kevin and Cheryl, thank you for going through the detailed plan and everything. I know there's been a lot of questions around regionals and provincials. With that being said, the ASSA board will be meeting next week, and we will communicate out further information on what may be offered for regionals and provincials and what we're doing with that and all the details around that. I know there's some concern about equality. You know, how are we going to make sure everything is equal as best as our ability? We will take all of Kevin has forwarded me a lot of those questions that you've had around regionals, provincials. We will take all of those into consideration with whatever direction we move towards. We would like to say that if your club chooses not to participate in one of these events, that's okay. But if a swimmer would like to participate, please allow them to do so and promote them to do so. We just want to see as many kids return to the water and get the experience of competing as much as possible. I do know that there was some questions that came in around whether clubs would be penalized for not hosting any meets. I can say confidently, and I'm very confident that the ASSA board will support me in saying that while traditionally that has been an expectation for our clubs as part of their membership to either co-host or host a meet, but in light of the pandemic and everything that's gone on this last year, for this year, there will be no expectation that clubs host or co-host a meet. So if you're in the position to do so, you're able to do so, we encourage you, but it's definitely not a requirement by any means. So yeah, other than that, I'll hand it back to Kevin, I believe.
Thank you, Lynette. And I think at this point, if memory serves, questions, and I'm gonna just take off the screen because I think we can actually just put questions in the chat box.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Kevin, is those that may be on the phone that have just called in, they can send, and they wouldn't be able to see the screen anyway, but they can send a question by text to 403-804-2708. And anyone else can certainly just use the chat. I do have a question, Kevin, that I have attempted to answer, but I think it might be relevant to the full group. Will there be another meet manager training session if someone already has plans and is unable to attend the session you have scheduled?
So with respect to the meet manager training session, the plan is to do a recording you know, it's a different, it's an orientation session. It's where the information is. And so, yeah, the plan is to provide a recording. So if they're not able to attend, if they just want to send me, the next, Monday, I can forward a link so that they can listen to the session.
And that's just for the meet manager, not for the referee and safety coordinator. Yeah.
And the referee and the competition safety coordinator orientation that is a required session. If there's a number of people that can't make that session for whatever reason, it may be possible to provide a second opportunity for that. But because that's a required session, that one will not be recorded to ensure that individuals are physically or virtually attending that event.
All right, and I did get a Oh, I did get a question here by text. How often do blocks need to be cleaned at a meet? We actually learned this just recently when we hosted a meet for our high performance exempt athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, originally there was everything was cleaned before and after each use from every person. The understanding that we have is that the requirement is that things be cleaned on a more regular basis than used to exist before the pandemic. So it is fine to have the blocks cleaned prior to each session, right? So if that's before each session or at the end of each session, it's once between each session, if that makes sense.
And it's generally the facility that will take care of that as well too. So I would say at the little sort of meet that was ran for those getting ready to prepare for trials, the facility staff just wiped down the blocks after each session. So it's not anything that necessarily the club volunteers need to do unless that is something that has been worked out with your facility. It says, I got a question from Xena, the warrior princess. I like that. I'm going to change my name to Word. Will there still be a requirement for swimmers to have attended at least one meet this season prior to attending regionals? So that might be Lynette.
In light of the fact we're not sure what regionals and provincials looks like, I can't fully answer that question, but I will say likely no, there will not be a requirement for that. So I guess what everyone on the call needs to be mindful of is things this year, as Cheryl alluded to at the beginning, will not look the same as we saw previously. So there will be tweaks to those traditional rules for this year. So more to come on all of that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Lynette. I do have a question here, probably for Kevin. With regard to the facility agreement, is this something outside the contract with the facility?
The facility agreement is, this is not something that needs to be, provided directly to, it's not something that needs to be attached to the meat package. It's not something that we need. It's something that must occur between the club and the facility. So that might be an in-person meeting where you've got your, your respective plans. That might mean there's a correspondence via email to address what the facility needs to, what the facility is going to take care of and what the club is going to do in terms of their planning. So in terms of how that looks, I think lots of facilities have different plans and different processes. So I would encourage you to work with your facility, find out what they need in terms of that agreement to make sure that everybody's on the same page and make sure everybody is following the same rules and requirements.
I do have another question here. Are relays discouraged? More focus on individual swims.
Oh, that's a great question. And I think if there was to be, as a part of training, the swimmers can be in close contact as a part of their sport. If they're out of the water waiting for the relay, if you want to have a couple pylons so that they're not all crowded up beside each other on the edge of the pool deck, then, the process to do that, the intent would be to figure out a process to do that. If you have a competition with multiple clubs and multiple teams where this is outside of the practice environment, then that becomes more problematic depending on the age of the swimmers. And so when it comes to competitions, I would agree that it would be discouraged depending on who's attending the competition. Unless there can be a way to do it safely. So it's not a no, but it does depend on how many bodies there are and how much space you have to manage.
Great. And I have a reminder, not a question. So from Richard on the ASSA executive, just a reminder to everyone to please make sure you get your receipts into ASSA board so we can process your $350 reimbursements. We're working with Team Unify for billing issues. So I don't know, Richard, if there's more you want to speak to on that, you can certainly unmute. If there's something, since we have an entire group here.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Thanks, Cheryl. So we are working with Team Unify to address the billing issues. Please get us your receipts to ASSAtreasure2015@gmail.com to make sure that we get your receipts so we can reimburse you. And for any clubs that do have some questions, it doesn't have to be just Team Unify. That's just happens to be the one that has given us an ASSA rate. It can be High Tech or Swimtopia or whatever software you use. And it doesn't have to be new now. If you already have software that you did before we mandated it, just send us some sort of receipt and we will make sure that we get processing as soon as we can. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Richard. I do have a few more questions that have come in. First one is it more realistic for regions to work together and to plan to run smaller meets, for example, with maybe just a few closest in distance clubs at a meet rather than inviting all clubs in the region? So that was the first question. And I think I can answer this one, Kevin, because we kind of addressed it at the top. We would really encourage that, actually, because like we said at the top, competitions will happen, but they're going to look different than what they've looked previously. And so we would hope that clubs would be a little creative in how they worked this year. I don't know, Lynette, if you have anything that you want to add to that. I'm assuming there's no regional boundaries that require regions to compete within a region throughout the season.
Nope.
No.
I really, at the end of the day, I mean, I actually just got a text from a club. They're looking at already a closed invitational. If you have, especially with some of our boundaries, I'll say on the edge of our boundaries, and I'm looking at Region B and Region C, especially in the Edmonton area kind of thing. If you have a close club next to you and you want to host a club invitational, and you can make it work between two ASSA clubs, fill your boots. That's what I say. Fill your boots. Let's get these kids swimming. Let's get some times in the database. And let's get back to racing, right? Get back to swimming.
Mm-hmm. And I would say just the other piece to that too, and Kevin and I have talked about this a little bit too, depending where your club is, if there is a year-round meet too, and the year-round and the summer club want to come together to race within the community. I know that hasn't happened previously, but I think this summer we could support something like that. And I think Kevin will work with you, and there's ways that we can separate out the results if needed. So that's another sort of creative option to look at too, if it happens to work better within your community. With the 3-week notice to sanction a meet, that's already putting us well into July, leaving very few weekends for meets. So Kevin, do you want to address this? I'm thinking we would sanction something next week if we needed to, but I'll let you.
Yeah, the 3 weeks is intended to provide enough time for feedback. Make sure that if there's something missing on the competition safety plan, I'd have to say this is going to be, based on the requirements, a new process for everyone, based on the additional pieces. And so it's, I think on top of that, quite a number of the meet managers are going to be new to, putting the meets onto the registration system. And so if there's a date that your club can access the facility, you just need to let me know early. I'll do everything I can to help you.
Okay. Awesome.
Sorry, can I just add one little piece? I know I've heard from a lot of regions, they're concerned about, and I heard this from a region, they don't feel that there's any referees or they don't have officials and that kind of thing. If you're unsure of who's a referee in your area, email Megan and she can help you out. We are all Swimming Canada officials. It doesn't matter that I'm familiar with summer swimming or that somebody else might be familiar with year round. They're all capable of doing summer swimming meets, year round meets. So reach out to Megan, and there is lots of referees in all of your areas that I'm sure that would help support a meet for you guys.
And I would say they have to go through that training too that Kevin's offering. So we will have a list available of refs that are available to referee as well. Is the season being extended to the end of August, even if provincials are actually held?
Yes, actually, we did announce at our last town hall that our season has been extended to August 30th. So you are welcome to continue training up until that date, after which then, of course, regular out of season, the training requirements come into effect.
And if they wanted to run a meet in late August,
You
it
betcha.
would be an issue from a Swim Alberta perspective. Good too from ASSA. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Kevin, can you quickly say the date again for the COVID competition coordinator training, referee training?
The competition safety coordinator and referee training is June 26th at 9 a.m.
And you'll be sending out some information. And do we have to have separate meets for 11 and unders and 11 and overs?
There does not need to be a separate meet. And there just needs to be a plan to keep, there needs to be a plan to keep either separate keep the cohorts separate or to maintain distancing when possible. So an option for a club, if they're running, meet, might be to do blocked sessions. And so blocked sessions would be something where the 12 and overs swim in the morning. Maybe they've got a joint warm up, and then there's 11 and under session in the afternoon, and they can have an empty lane in between the two cohorts of the 11 and unders that are swimming, if it was a dual meet, for example. So, blocked sessions might be an option. You might need to just have shorter warm-up times to make sure that there's, distancing can occur. So, but yeah, there does not need to be separate meets. Separating sessions and times would be an option to help maintain the separation of the cohorts.
So what I'm hearing is we need to put our creative hats on this year, Kevin, right? So we have to think outside the box. Do you think there will be many changes to meets in stage 3, and should we wait to plan if a meet can occur most likely in stage 3? So like I mentioned at the top of the meeting, what we know for stage 3, or what we've been told by Alberta Health, is that there will be no legislation in stage 3, but they still will be requiring, or they still will be providing to us recommendations that we will likely adopt and follow, sector guidance. And like I said, I'm not sure what will change in stage 3. I believe there will still be some element of a daily health checklist that will need to be done. There still may be an element of contact tracing that's recommended. Again, none of this legislated. I do believe there may be the 11 and unders, because we still won't have, likely by stage 3, that group vaccinated. So my guess is we're still going to see cohorts required for that group. And there could be recommendations still around distancing when you can. So the message we heard is where you should, or where you can, you should, right? And so my guess is we're going to be seeing some of that too. So the water piece will look very much like we have had in previous swim seasons, whether it's training or competition. The piece that still may be looking different in stage 3 may what the deck looks like the number of swimmers and officials and coaches on the deck, and how they may still need to be spaced out or distanced, as Kevin had said. So again, it's hard to know fully what that stage 3 sort of best practices or recommendations would be, but the focus will be on the safety of the swimmers, coaches and officials still. So I don't know if that really gives you an answer, but I would say plan for competitions like we're seeing in stage 2, because they can be done, and know that they'll easily then fit into stage 3. Historically, summer clubs have shared equipment to reduce costs for novice swimmers. Will this restriction lift? Follow up with specific chemicals should we use to spray down equipment? So I'm assuming this is like kickboards, flutter boards, maybe fins. So Kevin, I don't know if you currently have sharing.
I'd say that this, I think the first shared equipment when it comes to the practice environment, the first step would be to work with the facility and see what their requirements are. And I don't know what all the facilities have done. I've heard a couple of examples of from a couple of the programs, where the facility will make sure that the kickboards are all soaked in the pool water for a period of time before they go on to the next person, instead of drying them, spraying them, letting them air dry it before they go on or something. But I would work with the facility first, just with respect to what their requirements are. And then if there is specific club owned equipment that is not part of the facility, and you're not going to, like, if they don't have a process for you to follow, there is a link, I think under our resources, where, there's the cleaning and disinfection procedures that you can follow, and you can find products that way if you need to.
All right, thanks, Kevin. If this might be Lynette, I don't know. If regionals and provincials is a go, is there a date known?
The dates will be the previous dates if they are go, which I'm just looking on my calendar. I gotta look. I believe it was booked for the 20th of August, and usually regionals runs the weekend before. But again, don't put that in concrete cement, because we will be forwarding up further information next week regarding all of that.
All right. And I don't have any other questions that have come in. So unless there's anything else that anyone wants to put into the Dropbox or send by text, 403-804-2708. Oh, I see a little bubble with writing happening here. Are chaperones still allowed? Chaperones for travel? Where do you chaperone?
That would be under the stage 1, where chaperones, Kevin, where the chaperones, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and so based on the group size, right, based on the group size, if there was additional adults required for the safety of the group, there was up to 2 additional adults permitted. That could not take place in the activity. And I would say that for those type of examples, if those type of examples would have existed before COVID, if it was required for, required for swimmer safety, right? And so if there's somebody that needs to observe based on, a medical condition, for example, if there's somebody that needs to be there because there's somebody that can swim, but they've got some type of para classification that requires an assistant, those individuals would be permitted, and the distancing requirement would just be expected, right? Like no different than anybody else.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So I think the questions have slowed down. So Lynette, I don't know if you, not to put you on the spot because we didn't plan for this, but would you like to say parting words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all our clubs. I know it's been a tough season. I know there's been a lot of stop and goes. I know there's been the want and need for information that hasn't always come to you when you had hoped. And I just want to say thank you for your patience and your understanding and your support. It hasn't been an easy journey, but the light is at the end of the tunnel, and I'm optimistic going forward. We're only going to keep going up. Your commitment to summer swimming and to the swimmers has not gone unnoticed. And I thank you on behalf of the ASSA board. I thank you for your commitment to the sport and getting these kids back in the water and swimming and truly back to their passion and what they love to do, and bringing the spirit of summer swimming back. It's wonderful to see everyone's posts online of them hitting the pool and, the smiles and the excitement. And it's starting to feel like normal again. And I also want to say thank you to Kevin and Cheryl and Val, because I don't think she's on the call, but they have done a tremendous amount of work supporting ASSA. Nobody really, a lot of people will see Cheryl and she sends the occasional email, but nobody really knows how much heavy lifting they do behind the scenes. And it has been a lot this year, more so than any other year. And I think without them, I'm not sure how we would have been able to forge a path forward. So I really appreciate all the heavy lifting and work that you have done. It's great to be partners in swimming. And I am so thankful that we have you as our governing body to help guide us through and navigate this pandemic and beyond.
Well, it's our pleasure, Lynette. It's one big swimming community is how we see it. So, and I guess the only other thing I would say just imparting is don't struggle back in your clubs or within your regions. If you're still scratching your head and trying to think how you can put a competition together, reach out to Kevin. He's an incredible resource, and we'll be able to sort of guide and brainstorm and help you come up with solutions so that you can make it happen. So don't be afraid to reach out to the Swim Alberta staff. We're here to help. We want to see you have a successful season, and we'll look to be as flexible as we can with regards to sanctioning and what meets look like and that sort of thing to support swimmers getting back in the water and doing the sport that they enjoy and having the opportunity to race. So I want you all to know that we're here to help, and don't at all hesitate to reach out, because we'll work with you to make things happen within your clubs and communities. So I think that's it. And Kevin, I don't know if you had any final thoughts or comments before we say goodnight to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night and a happy swim season.
I think we can stop recording, Cheryl.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.